Good morning, everybody. My name is Melanie Lee, and I'm presenting on innovating health technology assessments and how we can support novel interventions. Joanne Doyle experienced desperate pain down the side of her face, so bad it went into her jaw, teeth, and gums. And she went from pillar to post, eventually ending up at the dentist and having extensive dental work. 1 tooth removed, 2 root canals. And £5,000 later, she was no better off understanding her condition. Her condition is trigeminal neuralgia, and it affects 1 in 10,000 people. And people with the condition may experience attacks of pain regularly for days, weeks, or months at a time. And in severe cases, the attacks may happen thousands of times a day and turn into a throbbing headache, and actually is a very, very poor quality of life. LifeArc is collaborating with a specialist PI, Joanne Zarchewska, who is actually a consultant at the NHS Trust of UCL, and she wants to fast track patients who have these symptoms to get to somebody who can really help quickly, because the condition leads to suicidal isolation, fear, and depression in extreme cases. But because it's not well diagnosed, patients can go through months of not understanding what's happening to them. And as we come to this later, you see, undiagnosed patient symptoms can be very frightening. So we're helping to pull together clinical information that helps identify at the early stages what might be the first presentation of symptoms for these patients, and how we can actually get them fast-tracked to specialist physicians very quickly. This full suite of products that would improve the whole patient experience here is information for them, educated physicians, and then fast-track clinics, which will actually help them straight to neurosurgery if required. So just a little bit about LifeArc, because we're helping with projects like that, but it's partly because we are very focused on translation. But we're focused on translation for all types of product that will help the patient achieve relief through the journey of their problems. And that goes right from diagnosis through to delivery of products that will improve well-being and improve therapy. We've got 200 employees, and we're actually self-funded because we we spun out of MRCT, the Medical Research Council Technology, and one of the benefits that we have realized on this journey is we achieved a royalty stream from the drug Keynote. I'll come back to that, which we've monetized. Amongst our 230 people, we have about 120 scientists, and the rest of our skill base, the rest of our workforce, are people who are IT specialists and lawyers and finance people, and people who actually really understand the journey of taking something through translation. So largely industrial skills. This actually shows in a very cartoon way that we're actually the green bridge between early discovery and diagnostic research and academic and charitable research pathways. And we work with that community to move the products that they have, help to understand what the potential of their investments are, and then help to move them with our ability to help design molecules, look at the assay development techniques, and protect the innovation, and move a package of information with modalities in a product into the hands of the commercial world that will actually be able to develop it further. Our whole emphasis in the way we think is we have to think about patient benefit. And this is not a simple, what's the drug going to do? It's the entire understanding of the environment that the product is going to enter when it goes into medical practice. So if we just look at what we call our 3 offerings, translation advice, science, and funding, we have these described here in a little detail, that obviously the translational advice teams, they will help to protect and manage IP. They'll look at the potential of research portfolios, and they'll actually look at the funding and the development paths to the marketplace and advise on those terms. We actually look after the MRC's IP as well, even though we're an independent charity now. The translational science laboratories are in England and Scotland, in Edinburgh and Stevenage, and we advance research from the early stage into drug discovery programs, and we collaborate on assay design. We've done a lot of work, for example, in these COVID times to both help with repurposing of drugs in the hands of others. We work very strongly in collaboration, but also to look at better diagnosis and also better therapies for the future. And then our funding stream is obviously the newest of our 3 offerings, and we have a pre-seed to venture strategy, and really want to help little companies in their very early stages of development, and work with external and downstream venture support to bring these into full fruition. This just actually is an example of one of the pieces of work that we've done over the years, taking the humanization technology from the MRC and Greg Winter's lab. We actually offered the services of humanization to the external community. And you can see over the years, we've had many requests to humanize antibodies. And from these 60 humanized antibodies, 19 have entered clinical studies. 5 are still in clinical studies, and there are 4 humanized antibodies currently on the market, of which Keytruda is one of the world's biggest cancer drugs. And that was what gave us the good fortune to be able to monetize a royalty stream and be able now to move ourselves from being the relatively small original organization that we were, offering translation services into the community, into one that now can work more strategically and more impactfully to benefit patients. And this is why this is so exciting in this world of new advanced therapies and rare diseases. So obviously we're in a rapidly changing world, and we have healthcare opportunities changing all the time. And with that, you see healthcare assessment bodies are evolving. And I just put the names of a few from around, particularly Europe, but also America up here. And the medicines are tending to become more specific and tailored products, and very much more identified select patient groups are emerging. New modalities like advanced therapies are coming through. These are actually just so completely different in terms of the world of healthcare delivery that they're entering, that we really have to understand how they're going to disrupt existing pathways for delivery and help them through to really show the benefits of why it's worth disrupting those pathways. What are the advantages? I'm a strong believer in the opportunity for early diagnosis of patients. And I think it will really help us to get a community of patients that are ready to help themselves, and actually may be the place in which we should be looking to be able to provide very effective therapies. When you look at considering new products, it's very important to aim not just for product authorization, but as I said, product uptake and adoption. And when looking at adoption, one really needs to understand barriers to adoption. And this helps us actually see what it is that we have to consider and how to go about it. So if you look at the barriers on the left-hand side, of those, they're not always the things we used to think about in a drug discovery setting. We used to think about the target product profile, but we didn't always think deeply about the processes that they're going to disrupt, people's resistance to new ways of working, how do we train and how do we bring people on board, and how do we truly demonstrate that something new and something different is really cost effective. These are the things that have to come into our thinking when we're looking at early R&D these days. And we support a lot of charities. This is amongst our list of charities that we support. And it's our industrial skills in LifeArc that help us actually differentiate between them as the discovery scientists and the researchers and the funders of those early research activities, and our skills to actually help them know where to put them and what their potential is. So, for example, with Aplastic Anemia Trust, we donated £1.15 million to King's College Hospital and King's College London to look at a personalised cellular therapy, which actually hopefully will reverse the ultra-rare condition of aplastic anemia. That is the type of early charitable work and funding that we can give with our philanthropic fund. The Great Ormond Street charity, we gave them £1 million of translational research to address needs for patients with rare diseases. And the Action Medical Research Funding Call, we actually gave £1 million there, again for translational research projects for children living with rare disease. When we actually look at rare diseases, they're becoming increasingly identified and understood. However, rare diseases bring a lot of challenges when you're taking them through a product development pathway and through a health technology assessment. And this is a complex slide, but I'll pick out just a few things. The disease itself manifests very heterogeneously in patients. So what doctors get met with is a whole range of different symptoms, and patients can find themselves in front of different specialists who don't understand the full picture behind what they're seeing. And the other thing about doing studies with rare diseases is actually that the patient pool can be quite limiting. Now, we can ease that by better diagnosis and then with the internet broader advertisement to draw patients to us. But of course, that's a bit of a chicken and egg because one needs the diagnosis in order to set up the clinical study well. Heterogeneous approaches of what is the right way to develop a product is actually something that is difficult when you don't have an established standard of care. And that's difficult for the authorities as well to really know what to compare with. And I think increasingly I make a bid here for us to initiate as many natural history data collections as we can. And this is why I believe very early diagnosis leading right through the progression of a disease, all that information collated in the right way will set us in very good stead for the future. So forward looking, the real value of the world efficacy and cost effectiveness of rare diseases is very, very important. And that's actually something that needs all these other considerations ahead of time so that the HTAi authorities are not left trying to guess against a very heterogeneous background of information. The UK Rare Diseases Framework identifies improvements that they believe will help to get these therapies better through an HTAi, and it's helping get faster diagnosis, an increasing awareness of rare disease amongst the health professionals, better coordination of care, and improving access to specialist care. All of those things, of course, were the things that came through the trigeminal neuralgia requirements as well. Moving further to illustrate the importance of diagnosis and the frightening heterogeneity of presentation of symptoms when rare disease patients have them, you may have watched a Netflix program, a diagnosis series. This is where Dr. Lisa Saunders uses a column in the New York Times to crowdsource diagnoses for mysterious and rare medical conditions. And she actually has a nice quote here, which says that patients really try and explore themselves. So she helps them explore beyond the limited boundaries of the family and friends that they know. And here you see, it's worth looking at this series because you see every age group from Sadie of 7 having unusual but frequent seizures, Angela 23 with severe muscle pain, and Willie 46 with memory loss and mood swings. And in all the cases shown, you see an enormous relief when the patients are diagnosed. They are very afraid. Diagnosis is not what they fear. What they fear is the unknown, the unresolved, the being alone with their symptoms. And in all cases, diagnosis provides surprising upsides. It gives them a name to understand their disease. It gives them a community of people who have the same issues. They get from them non-medical advice from that community on how to manage their problems. And they get information about therapies, dietary and exercise regimes that help their condition. It links the patient with research communities to stimulate medical solutions. There's actually an example of that where a research laboratory is working on a particular gene mutation in a mouse and had not understood the human manifestation of that disease. So early diagnosis does provide the pool of patients with whom we can work to ameliorate or prevent disease. They're very engaged community. Often they're early or pre-symptomatic. They may be better earlier, maybe you can get better treatment that way. And diagnosis often gives a willing community who will contribute and be active in that research, including looking at the genetics and disease causation. So I don't believe the medical community should leave diagnoses to crowdsourcing. We've got many opportunities to predict susceptibility and diagnose accurately. So I'm going to move on to actually just look at, and there are actually many examples of diagnoses that are actually contributed to broadly, with calls going out to the broader community to say what's out there that we should be testing for. And the newborn blood spot heel prick test is actually one of those that is increasingly giving testing for a broader range of serious conditions in the newborn, and is a good example of using a broad spectrum of inputs for that. This slide actually really looks at the information that HTAi authorities actually get presented with, and it shows you the heterogeneity of the stages of the information in terms of the development of the product. So you get many products approved on the basis of phase 2 non-comparative data, phase 2 comparative data that's randomized, some on phase 3, some diseases, some products haven't been assessed by these authorities. The authorities really do have a tall order in getting their decisions right and getting sufficient information ready to be able to make good judgments. So we've got to help them with that. They're trying to be open-minded, broad-minded, and we've really got to help them with that, understand. A pediatric example to treat spinal muscular atrophy is Zolgensma, which is the Novartis gene therapy for SMA. And it's a good example because it's priced at £1.79 million or $2.1 million, but it is considered cost effective. So NICE approved it, and so did ICER in the US on preliminary phase 3 data. And it's cost effective because one-off treatment could generate many years of gains for the children involved, allowing quality of life that no other prior therapy was able to do. And in this case, every aspect of that child's life, both their condition and surrounding care around them, was actually deemed to be improved and involved in the decision making. So this can be done, but we will be met with significant challenges as we try and work through each particular point. So patient voice is absolutely vital. Rebecca Saunders is the CEO of the Lipodystrophy UK. She was interviewed in Pharma Forum about how the patient voice could convince NICE to approve a much needed drug for this rare disease, and how regulator and pharma companies can make patient involvement more impactful. So she said the numbers were never going to tell the whole story. And she said patient voice is very difficult for researchers and regulators to understand what it all means, but stakeholders are well-meaning, and you need to have the personal touch in order to really draw out the gravity of the situation. So lipodystrophy is a rare disease with 2 forms. You get a generalized lipodystrophy, which is a total loss of subcutaneous fat cells, or you get a partial lipodystrophy, which is a partial loss but the fat that remains is distributed in inappropriate places around the body and can lead to metabolic abnormalities, including insulin resistance, diabetes, and elevated levels of blood lipids. NICE gave the patient community several opportunities to submit evidence, and Sanders notes that NICE is good at encouraging conversations with patient stakeholders in these meetings, and they've been able to speak as a charity at all of the appraisal meetings for the drug. And what it came down to was that the patients were able to describe that the first committee meeting for metroleptin didn't touch on how important hunger aspect was, because nobody had that discussion. It wasn't a recognized clinical endpoint. But after that, we were able to tell the company how absolutely important it is to explain why metroleptin helps with that aspect and how that impacts our quality of life. But of course, it would have been best to have that discussion up front. So the most surprising things, and I myself listened to a patient panel this week, and I was utterly amazed how these patients with bronchiectasis and cystic fibrosis are total experts of their condition and the polypharmacy they get subjected to and all its pros and cons. Patient involvement isn't uniform in HT appraisal processes. Only a small number of the European agencies integrate patients into the assessment process to a meaningful degree. In Belgium, patients aren't allowed in the HTA process, while in Germany, patient organizations are part of the GBA and can be heard, but they have no voting powers. The 6 other countries involve patient experts or patient groups at various stages of the process. However, only one, HTAi, England's NICE, involves patients in recommendations. So even though there are drawbacks, the agency isn't always able to ask the right question. We've got to be able to help with that. We've got to really help to bridge what's important to these patients, and is it marrying up to what you find when you're testing these products. So LifeArc's committed to this in our forward-looking approaches to launching translational challenges. We want to take these early scientific ideas and move them forward downstream. We invest in them and then pass them on to those who can take them towards the patient. But being self-funded, we've committed to tackling them through these translational challenges. And this little diagram shows how we walk around the disease, thinking about all aspects of the patient need. And as we launch our translational challenges, the first of which will be this year, we will intend to be able, using our thinking around the 4 diseases, to actually not just think about the therapies in them but by themselves or the diagnostics by themselves, but actually the whole ecosystem of products that will help a patient in the short, medium and long term, and generate a purpose for their involvement with us as we decide on how to really assist them. So finally, the importance of taking a holistic view of the HTA pathway should be clear. It's very important that innovation works for patients throughout their care. We look holistically at that whole pathway. We consider diagnostics as really key, and let's really put diagnostics and our potential to really predict patient future as front and center of our healthcare. Place equal value on patients' experiential and contextual knowledge so it can effectively complement the data-driven aspects of the HTA process. Ensure patient advocates are clear on what opportunities for submission exist and what kinds of information would be useful. You've got to have that dialogue to tell them what would be helpful, and ensure patient diversity is increased within the applicable population for the product. Provide a flexible model to ensure consistency and flexibility of evaluation across different HTA systems, and incorporate greater flexibility into the HTA system. Thank you very much.